hoc advisory districting committee meeting. Let's see, I'm going to do the roll call. Committee member Estrada.
Here.
Committee member Ricosa.
Here.
Committee, it's not turned on?
No.
Oh, thank you. Okay, Cherry Casey is here as well. Okay, before we go into public presentations, I am going into the let's go into the procedure first. I don't see the procedure on the agenda, but okay, here. Would you like to say a comment or? I use the mic. Thank you. Very much. Okay. So welcome everyone to the fourth and final public hearing of the Ad Hoc Advisory Districting Committee. This ad hoc committee has been established to hold the required 4 public hearings for council districting, listen to and consider all the input received from the public, review the recommendations from the demographer, and based on all these factors, the committee will decide on what to recommend to our council. Specifically, we will choose a boundary between the 2 districts and decide on the sequencing of the elections, which will depend on which district will be chosen as District 1. The committee is also is subject to all applicable provisions and requirements of the California Brown Act. Let me go into the proceedings of the public hearing. Public hearings are conducted by the chair in accordance with the following procedures. The chair of the committee directs all activities during the hearings. All comments shall be addressed to the committee, and members of the public shall be given up to 3 minutes. However, this may be reduced subject to the number of speakers and at the chair's discretion. No additional comments shall be heard upon the close of public hearing, although the committee reserves the right to direct questions to any speaker on any matter. In today's meeting, the city attorney will provide legal requirements on the decisions that on our recommendations. I will invite members of the public who submitted boundary proposals to review to talk about their proposals. 2 people submitted 2 proposals, so those 2 people will get 7 minutes each to speak. 1 person submitted 1 proposal, so that person will get 5 minutes. Then our demographer will provide presentation on the boundary options, including those submitted by the public. Then we will open up the hearing to the public to receive their comments. And here you will be allotted up to 3 minutes, depending on how many people, but given the number of people I see here, I think 3 minutes will be reasonable. Then we will close public hearing, and then the committee will deliberate and choose a boundary to recommend to the council. Then we will get to the second step of our decision. Again, the demographer will provide the second presentation on sequencing of the districts. And then the public will have an opportunity to speak. After we close the public hearing, the committee will deliberate again and decide on the sequencing to recommend to the council. Okay? I believe that committee member Ricosa has an opening remark.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. I just wanted to reiterate, I know we have people here, this is your first time at our series of meetings, that just to reiterate, based on like some input that we've seen, we're not here to discuss the merit of district-based elections. As you know, the voters of the city of Santa Clara will vote on June 5th of whether or not they want district elections. So the whole point of drawing district plans and a district line is if and only if the measure passes. The other thing is we're not deciding how many districts to have. That's already been prescribed by the city as having 2 districts. So whereas we appreciate your input on it, it's not a matter of decision making today as to the number of districts. The number of districts is 2. So we thank you very much, and we look forward to all your input this evening.
Okay, thank you, Committee Ricosa. Okay, moving on to the next item on the agenda, which is a public presentation on any matter that's not on the agenda. Is anyone interested in speaking? Okay, given none, we will move to the next topic, which is the approval of minutes from March 26.
I move a motion to accept the minutes as submitted.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Okay, motion carries. All right, now we are going to getting to the review of legal parameters. Would the city attorney be providing that?
Okay. That review is incorporated in this PowerPoint, and we're comfortable having Jean go. We're comfortable having Dr. Gobelay provide those parameters to you, and if you have any questions, you can ask me.
Okay, thank you. All right, so that will get us to the presentation by our demographer, Dr. Gobelay.
Sorry. The two people from the city attorney's office, City Attorney Doyle and Deputy City Attorney Fosley, will tell me if I left something out or said something incorrectly. But we have, first of all, two legal requirements. One is that the two council districts have each approximately half of the city's total population. This is based on the U.S. Constitution's Equal Protection Clause, I believe. It's essential that they be very close to equal in total population. Second, we have requirements of the Federal Voting Rights Act that when we draw districts, we need to try to provide groups protected under the Federal Voting Rights Act with the opportunity to elect representatives of their choice. And then we have a number of optional considerations which vary in importance in people's minds. And some people think that one is more important, or people think another is. But regardless, I would like you to know that there is no perfect plan, and there are inevitable trade-offs among the criteria. So in the end, decision makers have to figure out which criteria matter most to them, and in the understanding of what the trade-offs are. So the two legal requirements I already talked about: population balance, that's based on 2010 census population counts, and something that has developed in the course of our work for the city is that there has been uneven population growth since 2010. And we have estimated, we've provided estimates for population from new housing built and occupied since 2010 census. And one of the comparisons that we've developed for the city is the extent to which a plan might still work after census 2020 and not need to be redrawn or adjusted after the new census results are available. We measure Federal Voting Rights Act compliance in terms of the share a group protected under the Federal Voting Rights Act of the total citizen voting age population, of the entire voting age population. And what in fact we look at is what share the group has of all of the citizen voting age people, of that group's share of citizens who are citizens of voting age. And under the ranked choice system, which is the proposed districting system for the city to begin to use this fall, if approved by the voters, is that the protected group needs to have 25% plus one person share of the citizen voting age population in a particular district. This is if there are 2 election districts, which is what is proposed here.
Excuse me, can I just interject here before we move on from that previous slide? Could we go back? On number 2, the issue of protected groups' opportunities to elect representatives of their choice. You've received a letter, I think, dealing with the issue of whether you should split a population that is protected. And I just wanted to tell you that when you get to the issue of deciding which map, that letter goes to this particular legal requirement. And so if there are questions about that letter, we can talk about that at that time.
And I've already done some comparisons of plans in terms of whether key population groups, protected population groups, have been split by each particular plan. There's a table that does this comparison.
Right. I'm not suggesting we have the conversation right now, but I just wanted to point out that that's the legal requirement that letter is referring to.
All right, we've been tracking comments made at the first 4 public meetings, and also there's been an series of Open City Hall topics. And the first Open City Hall topic had to do with whether the city should be split into a northern and a southern council district, or whether it should be split into a western and an eastern council district. And relatively few people responded to this Open City Hall question, but there seemed to be some preference for splitting the city into north and south. Also, the public were asked on Open City Hall whether they'd rather use El Camino Real as the boundary. In that case, it would be between northern and southern council districts, or an east-west division using San Tomas Expressway. And I'll have more to say about that shortly, because there are some trade-offs here, as with all of the other criteria. All right, specifically on the subject of using major thoroughfares, I have analyzed those options of El Camino Real and San Tomas Expressway. Using El Camino Real as the boundary between north and south would work using 2010 census data, but would most likely to be adjusted after Census 2010 become available. And that is because since 2010, far more housing growth has occurred in the south than in the north. I know that there is more housing planned for the northern part of the city, but we have updated 2010 figures using the amount of housing growth in each piece of the city since 2010, and I can say that it is really very likely that using El Camino as the dividing line, which is simple and clean and probably is the way a lot of people think about dividing the city, it would almost certainly, I think, need to be adjusted, moving the boundaries somewhat southward, going south of El Camino in some areas. And there are a couple of plans that do this, or more than 2 actually. The west-east boundary results, using San Tomas Expressway, results in quite a large difference between the populations west of San Tomas and east of San Tomas, because far more housing growth has occurred since 2010 in the western part of the city, plus even using Census 2010 data, that really is a very grave imbalance and would be illegal under the population equality requirement. So we can't use San Tomas Expressway. We could use El Camino Real, but be prepared to redraw the lines in 2021 after Census 2020 data become available. So there are 8 draft plans now. The first 3 my firm developed, North-South 1, West-East 1, West-East 2, which I call a hybrid plan because it creates a diagonal, sort of a diagonal line between the parts of the city. And so part of it's a north-south division, part of it's an east-west division. Then Mr. Hassam Hagag drafted 2 plans, and Mr. Kevin Park drafted 2 plans, and Mr. Rob Jordanic submitted a plan. And the Park and Jordanic plans were what I would call hybrid. So these are all evaluated side by side in this table, which I'm sure you can't read, but I hope that the committee members have had a chance to read it. And there's a version of it in the handout for tonight's meeting. And it's on page 2 of my memorandum, which starts almost halfway through the agenda. It's immediately follows the results of the Open City Hall and election sequencing. These pages aren't all numbered, but if you keep turning till you get to a page that says memorandum, it's on what's called labeled page 2 at the bottom.
So, Dr. Gobele, excuse
Yes.
me. So at the beginning, when I described the procedure, I guess I mentioned that we'll give the people who made the proposals to talk about their proposals, but I don't see, and I'm sorry, I should have given them a chance to do that, but I don't see them right now. So is anyone here? Hassam, Kevin, and the last person is?
Rob Jordanic.
Yeah. Oh, you're here. Okay, so let's do that after Dr. Gobele's presentation then. All right, thank you. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Now, the version of this table compares all 8 plans with 1 row per plan. It's not exactly the same that's in the packet that you picked up at the door. So what I'm going to try to review with you is what the different columns are. And I think that committee members, you have a version of this that you can read, I hope. And I think you received it in advance so that you could zoom in on it. So this first row is for Plan North-South 1. And then it's followed in order by the plans over there on that opposite wall. The left-handmost plan map is not of a plan, but the rest of them to the right start with North-South 1 and go through RJ1. So the first column is the plan name, the second column is the plan type, and there's a north-south kind of plan and a west-east kind of plan, and there's a hybrid, as I've already said. The areas showing in blue here report the plan deviation, and the presumptive maximum deviation, that's the difference between the more and the less populous plans as a share of the ideal district size, which is half the city's 2010 population. All the plans meet the 2010 plan deviation requirement. So even though there's a range of percentages, it's my understanding that it really doesn't matter too much where it falls in that range. The next column, the one to the right in blue, is the number of districts with an Asian citizen voting age population share that's 25% plus 1 or more. And the only plan that has 2 districts with 25% plus 1 or more, Asian CVAP, is Plan WE1. However, that plan, because of population growth, would have to be rebalanced after Census 2020 results are available. And in addition to that, although there are 2 Asian CVAP shares that are big enough in 2 different districts, the shares are weaker, they're less than they are in all of the plans that just have one Asian CVAP district that's 25% plus one or more. The next column that has a couple of pink boxes in it is the planned deviation using 2017 data. The first blue column on the left is the 2010 planned deviation. Both WE1 and HH1 have deviations that are either very definitely too high, taking population growth into account, or right at the 10% margin. That's HH1, and the one that would have 14% deviation if 2020 census results were available now, and if all the housing growth and other populations changes in the city were taken into account, and that would be 14%. So I would suggest that WE1 and HH1 have the disadvantage of probably needing, or certainly or almost certainly need redrawing after census 2020. The next column is the number of split neighborhoods, and I used the next door GIS layer for the city's neighborhoods, which may or may not reflect the public's understanding of where the neighborhood boundaries are. And I don't know that there's any consensus on exactly what the names of the neighborhoods are or what their boundaries are. So I need to have you judge that. The next column is the number of elementary attendance areas from the Santa Clara Unified School District that are split in the plan, and there's a range here as well. The number of split precincts, election precincts, is the next column. This column is the number of split precincts. And there aren't really a lot of them in any plan, so that I don't think that the split precincts count really matters too much, because the Registrar of Voters, when implementing a plan, needs to split precincts according to the plan that gets adopted. So, and the number of split precincts, which is as high as 5, is not very large, given that there are approximately 49 precincts in the city. Most of them are intact. And the next column is the boundaries used, and the simplest one of these is HH1, which uses only El Camino Real. None of the others is quite that simple, but the list from north to south or from west to east is given in this column. And then finally, I've pointed out some noteworthy characteristics, and this is worth studying if you can, because I've mentioned here things about the groups that have been mentioned so far as possibly being split in some of the plans, like the Asian population concentration region of the city, and the Hispanic population concentration region of the city, and the Filipino population concentration area. So that column contains comments about that, but I won't read them to you because you have them in your packet. Now the next table is new. It didn't make it into the printout because I just finished working on it about 1 o'clock this afternoon, just to be sure I got it right. What I did was take the city's 49 precincts, at least the database I had 49 precincts, and divided them where any one of the plan's boundaries split that precinct. And then I summarized the numbers of total registered voters, the total number of people identified as having Asian surnames in the California statewide database, and the number and the share of the registered voters with Hispanic or Spanish surnames, and then all other surnames. So we have 3 columns here. These 3 are the Asian surname, the Hispanic or Spanish surname and the all other surnames columns. And highlighted in the darker pink are the districts, and there are 2 districts in each plan, so there are 2 rows for each plan. And you'll see that we have several districts with 25% or more, or nearly 25% shares by Asians. But what really is important, I think what people were getting at when they mentioned needing to see this kind of information before, was actual voter turnout in November of 2016. And if really the question is, if Asians voted together to support a particular candidate, would they have enough of a share of the actual turnout to have elected a candidate or candidates of their choice back in November of 2016? And the answer is that there are 4 plans, 1 district per plan, with 25% or more of the turnout. So you have 4 plans that meet the 25% plus 1 person criterion if applied to the actual turnout. Of course, that 25 point plus 1 person is meant to apply to the citizen voting age population, and I've applied it to actual voters. But I just thought you'd like to see this anyhow. Hispanic people with Spanish surnames do not have anything close to 25% because the city's Hispanic population is not really very concentrated and it's not very large. The table must be viewed with caution, however, because surname matching and surname lists are rather inexact. There are a lot of false positives and false negatives. If my last name were Garcia, for example, they probably call me Spanish surname, but it would be a Spanish surname, but I would not be identified by most people as being Hispanic. And similarly, if my last name were Wang or any other Asian surname, I would be a false positive. And there are false negatives too, because the surname lists are incomplete. The Spanish surname list is the best developed. The other ones are kind of experimental, and I've grouped all Asian surnames together here. So I think this is a really important table, and I'm glad I was able to finally get the data together for it. All right, now we have each plan, and the first plan is North-South 1. Its deviation using Census 2010 is less than 1%. It rounds off to 0%, in fact. And the planned deviation in 2017 would have been, and if the only population change had been from new housing growth, would be less than 1%. So this plan would stand up, I think, under 2020 census numbers. The estimated Asian citizen voting age population in the north is 39%, and the south is 21%. And the maps are posted over there. Should you care to go and look at them while I'm speaking, that would be fine, in case you would like to see them better. But I think that, do we have maps in this handout? Yeah, okay, good. So this is a fairly good plan, except for the boundaries not being nice and neat like El Camino or San Tomas Expressway. This plan was drawn to keep the Korean business district here together, this area, and to keep the old quad area of the city together. So that's one reason for having the somewhat odd-looking boundaries. And I have to say that people tend to want to see if there's gerrymandering in the appearance of a plan. And I've been working on districting plans since 1980. And I have to say, gerrymandering is in the eye of the beholder, because there usually are good reasons for any kind of crooked line, unless it's for the protection of incumbency. but that was not done in this case. The incumbents are not protected. The incumbency was not taken into account. I did report later on, you'll see, the distribution of the incumbents in each plan, but the incumbents don't live in the right places for incumbency to be protected under any plan, I don't think. So that was not a consideration here. This keeps the Filipino concentration area, which is the part of the city north of 101, intact. It does split an area with a relatively large Latino population, which is right in this area. These two areas are separated from each other in this plan, and that's the part of the city with the largest Hispanic population concentration. All right, this map shows to the north of 101 the Filipino area, also one of the heavily Asian portions of the population north of 101. The gold area is the Hispanic concentration area. The big red dots are post-2010 population growth from new housing, which we estimated. Here's WE1, and I've already said some things about this one already, including the fact that we have 2 Asian CVAP districts with 25% plus share of the total CVAP. But you'll notice that the shares 31 and 27 are lower than you see in the single Asian CVAP concentration districts that just have the one in the plans that just have one Asian CVAP district. And here's the map boundaries of W1 overlaid on the things that you saw 2 maps ago. This plan does have the problem, as you see in red on the right, that this one would exceed the 10% maximum permitted deviation after census 2020, or if we had the census last year. WE1 is the 3rd plan that I developed, and this plan has low deviation, well below 10%, as of 2010 and 2017, and the west part of the city, actually it's sort of the north and west, has 38% of its total citizen voting age population Asian CVAP. Then the same map for WE2 that we've seen before. This is Mr. Agag's first plan, HH1, which uses the entirety of El Camino Real as the dividing line between the north and the south. And this is the plan that has 10% deviation as of 2017. It started out with 9% deviation in 2010, and 10% is presumably the highest permitted. But it is a nice clean boundary, but I don't think it would last past 2021. And here's plan HH2, which Mr. Agag tried to balance better. He did balance better by including this very small area in the north. And this brings the deviations way down for 2010 and 2017. The north, again, has a 37% Asian CVAP share. Fairly clean line. Then Mr. Park, Kevin Park, submitted 2 plans. This is his first one. Again, he drew a plan that is a hybrid with territory in the northern part of the city and in the western part of the city. The boundary line uses Montague Expressway, San Tomas Expressway, and then Homestead, I think it is. Low deviations for this plan, 38% estimated Asian CVAP share in the north. This plan splits the Filipino population concentration, which is really quite small. If you see the big black numbers showing the share of the Filipino population that's in each piece of the territory north of 101. These are small population shares, but it does not split the Hispanic concentration. It splits Filipino, Asian, and Asian, but does not split Hispanic. And this is Plan KP2, which has a slightly different boundary that uses 101, San Tomas Expressway, and El Camino for a little while. And then, oh dear, I can't read it. Can you tell me what it is? Well, the north-south one I was talking about. Kylie, yes, Kylie and Homestead. I can't read my own table, I guess. Thank you. I need a bigger monitor. All right. And this is Mr. Jordanic's plan, and its deviations are quite low as well. And it has a 39% estimated Asian CVAP share in District A, which is the west-northwest. This plan uses Saratoga Creek as the large north-south portion of the boundary. And using the creek as a boundary splits some election precincts, but I mean splits some census blocks, which are used to count the total population. But these deviations from a straight line don't affect the population counts at all. So the registrar of voters would make it look a lot nicer than it does here without the little jogs. So adopting a plan, if your goal is to adopt a plan that's less likely to need adjusting after Census 2020, the plans are ranked on this table from the lowest deviation in 2017 to the highest in the right-hand column. And you see the two in pink at the bottom are 10% or more, signaling the need for readjustment. So the committee can talk about the maps and ask any questions you have, or you could proceed as you wish. Al? Okay,
thank you, Dr. Gobele. Thank you for all this hard work. It was a lot of number crunching and a lot of analysis, so we had to work with very short schedule, and so thank you very much for completing this report. I guess I said at the beginning that the people who propose their own maps will have an opportunity to discuss their work. So this is probably a good time to invite them to come up and speak. I don't see Mr. Hagag and Mr. Park, but I do see Mr. Jardonic. So would you like to talk about it? You have 5 minutes.
Hi, my name's Rob Jordanic. I submitted the map RJ1, and I just wanted to say a couple more things about it that weren't highlighted there. The map I drew had the highest Asian population, but that was the actual population, not the CVAP. I don't know if that was taken into account. Yeah.
It's not really a key fact here. It's the share of those eligible to vote that matters when we evaluate plans.
Okay. Yeah, and it's definitely really important to me. I live in the north side, and I really think the north side should not be split up. So that I think the population north of 101 should all be in one district, because they have a lot of the same common issues that, like, such as the stadium, that my map and some of the others as well kept the north side intact. So I'd prefer to eliminate any of the plans that divide the north side above 101. But I think several of the plans are good. I just wanted to make sure you considered all the options, and And I liked NS1, HH1, KP2, and RJ1. I think those were all well done. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. I guess I'd like to now open the hearing to the members of the public. So each of you please take turn and come up and speak. And you have 3 minutes.
Okay, sure. First, I'm Diane Harrison, and first of all, I did submit a plan, but I'm guessing it wasn't considered legal, or I'm not even sure if you looked at it.
I did.
You did, and it wasn't legal?
Well, it was incomplete as I understood it.
Oh.
I'm sorry, maybe I didn't see your plan.
It's on this email. It's right after his plan. It's an email, and it says at the top somebody's name, Jennifer Yamaguma. So she printed it from her email, I guess. Anyway, it probably isn't legal or something. I don't know, but it was complete. I did put all the pieces together.
Oh, I'm sorry, I think it came in.
I didn't do it as a drawing. I don't know how to do that, but I just did the pieces. And
well, I can point it out over here if you want.
You
And
can?
You can tell me where it is.
Okay, well, I put together in one district, doesn't matter whether it's one or two, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 23, 24, 26, 27, 28, getting a total count of 52,303. And the reason I put those together, and I know there is a problem with discontinuity in the other district, but what I was trying to do is, because I knew everybody was going for the Asian vote, I was going for the Hispanic vote, because I hardly ever see any Hispanics at the meetings, and that was my goal, to try and get some Hispanic representation. So that was the best way I could figure out of doing it, and I guess...
I did see your plan. That
Yeah.
was fairly early that you submitted.
Yeah, I did.
And because it was not contiguous,
Okay. I had a feeling that.
I'm
Okay.
sorry.
Yeah. Okay. Well, then that's that. And the only other thing is, I just did a thing on Nextdoor right before I left, that maybe we still need to have some more, maybe after this meeting, I guess, some more complete information, because the number of people who come to these little meetings is pretty small, and from what you were saying, the number of people who did the online survey, pretty small. Just letting people know the whys. People need to know why there are two districts. I realize that's what it is, but if you're not going to vote for it if you don't know the why, and to discuss why they chose to, and the pros and cons, or whatever the pros, especially of the ranked choice voting. Like I said, I linked to a website that has some good arguments on that, but I think the city should provide that in writing and mail, not on the website, but someplace where people who can't deal with websites too well can see this information, so that people know. Because I think if people don't know, and a majority of people in Santa Clara are not here tonight, if they don't know, they will vote no. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
My name is Karen Hardy. I've lived in the city over 30 years. I will make a disclosure that it doesn't matter how you draw the lines. All 4 houses I've lived in Santa Clara would be in the same district. So it's not about me. What I want you to understand is I was on the first committee in 2011 when we talked about ranked choice voting. When we did look at that and were told by the Register of Voters it wasn't possible. And so we made some suggestions and said when it did become possible, we wanted to see that. And that got noted and filed. I also served on the Planning Commission for 8 years. So I am very aware of where development goes and how that changes that. So I'm coming from that perspective. And I will tell you, it's very obvious to me. First off, I've walked many precincts and talked to many voters. I've ran For council, I also have walked over many different issues and walked for other candidates. And it's very obvious to me that the last three up there on the wall are people who have also walked precincts and talked to people.
You
It's
talked
very
about
clear
KP1, KP2.
that's Kevin Park 1, Kevin Park 2, and RJ 1. Yeah.
Okay,
It's
thank
very obvious to me that they live there. They live in the neighborhood. They understand the city, and they understand some of the natural boundaries that are there, because the rest of those do not. And when I looked at the numbers, it also broke up the least number of neighborhoods and precincts. That makes sense, because the reality is, if we go for this, you will only get to vote for 3 council members. There are only 3 council members that you will be able to put your vote for. That's the thing we have to understand from this. And also my other concern is, we are going to be doing a census in 2020, and I don't understand why we wouldn't adjust lines based on a 2020 and want to put this out for another 12 years. That doesn't make sense. Everything I've heard, the concern was, well, we don't want to have to change in 2 years. Well, we may have to, because we're going on 2010. That's your reality. And those are already old. Things change. And we know where the development is. So I would say very strongly, I think Kevin Park and, I'm sorry, Jorgensen, and Mr. Jorgensen have thought through that a lot more and thought about what it's like to live here. The demographic, people don't live here. They don't walk the neighborhoods, they don't walk the precincts, they don't talk to those individuals. I have. Those make sense to me, because that gives
Okay, thank you.
a large group
It's been 3
a
minutes.
voice.
Ms.
Well,
Hardy, thank you.
You don't have a timer, so you can't tell,
Well, that's
unless you're showing me. You have to tell us by law.
okay. So you brought up one question that I quickly like to get addressed. We are going to have another we're going to go review the district again after the 2020 census results become available. That's
In
my
fact,
understanding.
you have to just to double check that it still is balanced.
Yeah.
And even if it were still balanced, the city could decide to adjust the boundaries to maybe keeping in mind the fact that there's going to be more housing growth in the north during the next decade. So it still is possible.
Okay, thank you. All right. Would you like to give us your name?
Hi, my name is Mohsin Mirza. I'm the Voting Rights Program Coordinator with Asian Americans Advancing Justice Asian Law Caucus. We're the nation's oldest legal and civil rights organization serving the Asian American community, and we're based in San Francisco and serve communities throughout the San Francisco Bay Area. So we are not parties to this lawsuit or the districting process at all. We really view our role as community education. We did send in a letter concerning some of our concerns related to the districting process. In particular, we just I wanted to come here to emphasize the importance of the final districting plan, keeping as many communities whole as possible, as this is the central key for these communities to have influence, whether it's the Asian American community, the subsets of the Asian American community in the Indian American and the Filipino American communities, or the Latino community as well in the city. So a couple of the maps gave us cause for concern as they split up the the northeast corner of the city, which has a very dense population concentration of Asian Americans of various backgrounds. And that was all I wanted to share with you all. I want to thank you all for your time, and looking forward to seeing how the rest of this plays out. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Maybe this is a good time to address what our attorney Doyle brought up at the beginning of the meeting.
I do think that the speaker has brought up an important concern, and I would validate his point that that's something that you should consider very strongly in choosing a map, in not splitting up identified protected groups.
Yeah. Thank you.
Should
Yes, a question. So when
Okay.
you say North Santa Clara, you are meaning north of 101?
I believe so. Yeah.
Can you be more specific and tell us which pieces you're talking about?
Well, I mean, it's sent in the letter. I can't specifically nail down at the precinct level for you all. I do know in that northeast corner of the city, there's I can potentially follow up later with this data. A concentration of Indian Americans and Filipino Americans. These are maps I've seen based on census data. Specifically, I would have to follow up with the data I don't have on hand. What we did provide is from a tough study that we had done related to this. We are happy to share that with you all upon request, but that doesn't divide up. That is more a reflection of the entire city and splitting up north and south. I can't speak to the specifics of the different lines and how it plays out. Does that make sense?
I understand what you're saying, and I thought I had a printout of the different pieces because I like to make sure that this wasn't brought up as an important legal issue. So I want to make sure that we're talking about specific pieces.
I put a map up that might help.
Oh yeah.
I could help answer your question.
Right.
He's talking about the area north of 101 as being an area of concentration of Asians.
Mhm.
Actually, it's this area because this pieces of the city hardly have any
Yeah.
population. But
Right.
in any event, he's talking about keeping this area
Intact.
Yeah.
intact as an Asian concentration. And also, some of the plans do use Montague as an expressway as a boundary. But using Montague Expressway as a boundary not only splits the Asian concentration, but also splits the Filipino population, which is the same area as the Asian population. And the Latino population concentration areas here. So what you see in blue is both all Asian groups combined in Filipinos.
Mm-hmm.
And
North of
when we
101.
say population, let's be specific. We're talking about CVAP or the population?
All categories.
All categories, which means
Yeah.
population from
Yeah,
the 2010 census
these
data.
numbers here are total population, like 17% of this area. Total population is 17%, and this share is 27% of the total 2010 population.
Right. Okay. But
Alright.
again, that doesn't equate to the CVAP. And that's the number that we've been looking at when we do
No, I don't have any data on Filipino CVAP, just Asian.
Right.
Any more questions?
Yeah, I guess my comment is, so I understand what you're saying, but
Mhm.
I'm having struggling with whether we're making an apple-to-apple comparison.
Do you,
Perhaps I could help.
Sure.
Yeah, I think you are. I think you're making it. I think they are apples to oranges, but I think it's an additional consideration. It's not the same as CVAP, but it is an additional consideration. The fact that so you have CVAP as one consideration for where you draw the line, and then once you're considering that, if regardless of CVAP, if you're breaking up a particular identified protected group, you may want to consider, okay, I have two different things that both meet the same CVAP or similar CVAPs, but this one would be more likely to break up a protected group, and this one would be less likely. I think it's a factor that you should consider in making your decision.
Thank you. I'm also looking at Dr. Gobolet's latest data. I think this is very relevant as well on whether we're splitting the votes by drawing certain lines at specific places.
all right. Without any further question, thank
All
you all
right.
for your clarification.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Anyone else have a question? Okay, great. Anyone else would like to speak? And please state your name if you like.
Good evening. My name is Margaret Okuzumi, and I'm here with Fair Vote, California. And so all 8 lines, the numbers for all 8 of the lines, they're not really that much different from each other. The H1 line does seem a little bit more advantageous for Latinos, but they're all fairly close. I will note that the HH1 plan, even though it is imbalanced, it's the North District that has less population, and if I'm understanding correctly, a lot of the future growth is planned in the North, so it may not be so bad. But what I handed out was a drawing of, this is actually the RJ1 line, and then showing where the current council members and mayor live. So you might find that informative. And so I've been talking with a number of residents about the line, and I think, you know, a lot of people do feel that a line along El Camino Real sort of intuitively makes sense, but a lot of people also said that something similar to the KP2 or RJ1 line, like also, you know, they could see some arguments for that. And there are some people who do feel very strongly that the north and the west areas do have more affinity with each other. They're newer developments. They tend to be residents that are newer to the area. And lastly, I'd like to say that no matter what line you end up recommending in terms of the sequencing, that the district with the old quad area should be selected to go first. The reason for that is that there is higher turnout in presidential election years, and the area.
Excuse me, the first one to go is 2018. Just to. Okay, thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. That in 2018, it should be the whatever district contains the old quad area. They turn out at higher rates. And the other district should be the one that goes in presidential years, because there is more of a drop-off in like Asian turnout in the gubernatorial years. So just from a more of a voting rights perspective, it would be better for minorities if whatever district that contains the old quad, you know, whether you use El Camino Real or some other dividing line, that the one with the old quad should go in 2018. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments? Okay, I have a comment on what Ms. Okuzumi raised, and I guess this is going to be part of the deliberation, but one notable and interesting piece of data that Dr. Gourvelet researched on is the difference in the turnout between the gubernatorial year versus presidential election year. And the difference is pretty staggering. It's almost 50%. So in the last election cycle, in 2016, almost 85% of our voters voted, while that number was around 35.7% in the gubernatorial election in 2014. So what Ms. Okuzumi is saying is we're talking about a huge difference in number turnouts. Okay, thank you.
Hi there, my name is Anthony Becker. I'm a Santa Clara resident. I ran the last election, and I relate to Mrs. Hardy, where you're walking all those precincts, you kind of understand it a little more. I probably lost about 10 pounds doing all that. What's really hard for me to wrap my head around right now is how we're only going to 2 districts. I know this has been talked about before, but it's still bothering me because when I was a young boy for about 10 years, I lived in the city of Los Banos, and that's about 40,000 people as of right now. The city has 4 districts, and when I was a young boy, the council was primarily white. Now the council is very diverse, including 2 African Americans, a Latino, and a Portuguese, who is now the mayor. So my question really, or not my question, but my statement really is that I fear that we are treading on some really scary ice here, because I feel that if this goes through for 2 districts, the lawsuit is not going to end, and we're going to continue to be sued. And I feel we're going to waste I think it's $170,000, or I think it is, for the election for this. Why aren't we going to more districts? I think if we went to more districts, to be honest, I think we would have more diversity on our council. But if we're going to go just to 2, then why does smaller cities like Los Banos, Menlo Park, for example, have smaller populations, are voting more diverse, and yet here we are in Santa Clara, and it feels like we're still in the Stone Age. I'm for ranked choice voting and everything, but when I look at this, I support the last 3 over here if we're going to go to 2 districts, but it's still hard for me to wrap my head around that smaller cities are going to districts and it's more diverse. And it makes me fear that we're spending money and wasting money when we could have this solved already. I mean, I think Menlo Park didn't even have an election to go to 6 districts. So that's just a concern I have. And I think many other people might have this same concern, especially if smaller cities in the state of California are doing district elections without, I mean, like she said also, Mrs. Hardy, that 2020, it's going to change. And like we're going by 2010 numbers. Once again, are we always 10 years behind a curve? I mean, yeah, we're adjusting for the growth. But for example, Los Banos during the 90s of the dot-com boom, that city grew 20,000 people almost within 10 years. And it's just kind of just a statement. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I guess we already covered that ground on why we decided to go to 2 districts, so.
No, for the people who are watching at home, this committee does not have the authority to change what's already on the ballot. The decision to place 2 districts on the ballot has already been made, and there's no opportunity at this point to go to a different number of districts in terms of allowing the voters to make that choice. So, and we can't, the committee is not in a position to discuss the merits of whether or not Measure A should pass. That's not what's going on here. What's going on here for the folks that are listening is we're simply carrying out council direction to be prepared. If the ballot measure passes, we need to rapidly have the districts in place so that we can have a district election in November 2018.
Thank you for clarifying that. Thank you. Anyone else interested in telling us what you think? Yes. Committee member Ricosa.
Yes, I move that we close the public speaking area. You don't have to? Okay. So.
Wait, didn't we say that we need to close the public hearing?
It's not that type of a public. It is a public hearing, but it's not that you need to close.
All right. Right. All right, so let's move on to the next part of this discussion, which is the deliberation by the committee. Let me make sure I covered everything. So now it's the committee's turn to deliberate and choose a boundary to recommend to the city council. I guess the floor is with Mr. Ricosa.
I believe before we do anything for any deliberations, we need to discuss our method of voting. How are we going to pare down the numbers? I mean, if there isn't, I have a suggestion, but if this was previously determined.
Okay, I would like to firstly get a feeler from my fellow committee members on whether they have whether they have any preferred options, if they have one or multiple, so that we can discuss what steps to take to choose one. So if would like to go first? Okay. Community member Estrada.
Good evening. In reviewing all the data that we've collected over the last 4 weeks, I have taken all the pieces and put them all together and looked at all the rules and the laws that we're bound by, and I'm down to recommending either NS1 or HH2.
Okay, so you have two selected. How about committee member Ricosa?
Well, I thought we were going to first discuss the method of voting, but maybe we don't have to. So if Dr. Gobelet, you could put up slide 24, which is just 2 slides. I'm in agreement, actually, with committee member Estrada. Actually, I feel it's important to keep the North Santa Clara, as was already brought up, intact. And in general, my general feeling is that the needs of the north side differ from the needs of the south side. It's a north and south thing. It's not an east and west thing, right? And also, ones like this, well, yeah, that slide, we go back to that. I too agree, actually in reverse order, that I am in favor of HH2 and NS1. As a matter of fact, I would, even if we want to make a motion to immediately eliminate HH1 and WE1, given that they're literally below the line and have issues with being balanced, particularly in 2017. But if we already have some basic agreement on the board, I too support HH2 and NS1, both being north-south oriented plans.
Okay, thank you very much. So I guess we're getting down to a pretty small number of candidates, and so I like to now share my thought on this and walk you through my thought process. Okay. First, and papers. All right, so firstly, I'd like to thank my fellow committee members, the staff, especially Dr. Gobelet, for all the work that went into this process. It was such a compressed schedule. This was not an easy thing to decide for any of us, I don't think. Because firstly, I too was part of the 2011 the committee, Charter Review Committee. And at that time, the city hired Dr. Gobelet for that committee to provide demography report. And that report showed that we really had no distinct ethnic enclaves or an enclave of protected class of people in our city. And this round of data also shows that while there are some variations, the people are spread up throughout the city, although there seems to be some distinct difference between north and south. But in 2012, the committee decided that we didn't see any distinct geographical differences to recommend going to the district. And again, there are no, as Dr. Gobelet said at the beginning of this meeting, there are no perfect solutions. And any choice that we'll make will entail some trade-offs. And so I looked at the updated demography and the 8 proposals that we're looking at today. And I have to say that if the protected class CVAP were the only consideration, then it's pretty obvious what we should do. I mean, we should try not to split the North and South. However, when I signed up for this committee to make a proposal to the council, I signed on and I agreed to serve because I wanted to make a recommendation that would be of most benefit to the city over the long term. Not just this year, not just 2018, not just 2020. And I did a lot of thinking about this matter. I analyzed all the data that Dr. Gobele presented in a great detail. I downloaded the spreadsheet and I sliced and diced the data, just as I'm sure people who presented their maps did. And I crunched a lot of numbers, and I also did my own research. And I'd like to mention that all of it from the publicly available information, and to come up with my own idea about what this committee should recommend. So I like to go over that in step by step. Okay. So when in choosing one of these maps, I think our priorities is, firstly, we need to meet the law, less than 10% deviation. And we also want to try to hit the agent CVAP of 25% or more in any district that we're going to be creating. Unfortunately, we will not be able to achieve this with the Hispanic population because their population level is not large enough to hit the 25%, no matter how we slice the map. We want to try to keep the geographical split as clean as possible, and I think everyone tried to do that with all of these options. And also, we'd like to try to keep the district boundaries stable over time. I feel this is very important because we're not going to be introducing this district in just one election cycle. It's going to happen in 2018 and 2020, and we're going to be, and that 2020 election will immediately be followed by new census data in 2021 when we will be looking at the districts again. But after we're going through a phased transition over this several-year period, I really think it'll be detrimental to the city to try to have to go through another redistricting and to come up with completely different districts. And also we like to make sure that we look at the future residential growth. Where are the new housing being built in the city? So those are the issues. Those are the priorities that I try to address in try to come up with my decision. Okay, let's see now. Okay, so the reason why I think it's important to look at the residential growth in the future is because our housing build is concentrated on one part of the city, mainly north. And those are the projects that I'm talking about, and those are the developments entailing more than 1,000 units of housing. Those include the City Place near the Levi Stadium. The city has already approved 1,680 units. We also have Santa Clara Square, that's near the new Whole Foods is. And if you have been to that part of town, you know that the condos are already going up. People are moving in. So no matter what happens to our economic cycle, those condos are coming in. Another big development is the Lawrence Station, where the developer is entitled to build 3,500 units. That's enough to, when that comes in, that's enough to swing the difference, the deviation of 10% by a huge margin. And then, so those are the big ones that have a pretty high chance of being completed because they're already entitled and constructions have already started. Well, except for the the city place, but I think it has a, it went through the lawsuit. The lawsuit has been resolved, and the related has already spent a lot of money to try to build those housing. So I think it has a good chance of happening. And then there are other projects that Santa Clara is looking at. First one is Keeley at the old Yahoo site, which is in the north part of the city. That's going to be across Great America from the stadium, other side of Great America, or other side of the convention center. Okay, and then another proposal that the city has been spending a lot of resources and time looking at is the Tasman East, which is right next to the city place, right next to the stadium. There are approximately 45 acres, and people are talking about building 100 units to an acre, so you can do the math. We're looking at more than 4,000 units. So what is going to happen over the next decade? Based on our current job trends and who are the people who are migrating to this area, we're not seeing a lot of people moving in from other parts of the country. All the new people we're seeing are from other countries. So I think that the huge portion of the new residents who will be moving into these developments will be people of protected class, and most likely Asians. So what I'm concerned about in choosing a north-south configuration, which is half of what my committee member Ricosa and Estrada prefer, is that no matter where you draw the line, with all these new developments coming in, we'll most certainly need to redraw the district. And Dr. Gobele has mentioned this again and again in her presentation. And another thing is, let's say that in 2021, we moved the line slightly, but after 2021, we're going to have thousands and thousands of new units, new residential units coming on in the northern part of the city. And between 2021 and 2031, we're not going to have another census, which means we're not going to do another districting. So what that means is that we're going to have a higher and higher concentration of people from protected class in the northern part of the city. But over that 10 years, no matter how many more people move into that area, they only get to choose 3 council members, which means that as the time goes on and more people have, more agents move into that area, they will still have only 3 council members. So each of their vote is going to be worthless. And there's going to be a disenfranchisement of these people over the next 10 years. So this is why I think that it's important to look at this issue over the long term, not just to avoid the lawsuit next year. And based on these considerations, I believe that WE1 plan best meets the priorities that I mentioned. Currently, it meets the law, less than 10% deviation. And Asian CVAP is 31% and 27% in both districts, which are both higher than 25%. And I was encouraged to see Dr. Gobele's data today, which shows that with the WE1 voting records in 2016, 27.5% of the voters in what would fall in the western part of the district were Asian, and 19.4%. So the deviation between the deviation is even smaller than we worry about. Okay, if you look at just strictly the CVAP, it's 31% and 27%. Another consideration is that the geographical split, which I think is fairly clean. not messier than any other proposals. And the advantage of this plan is that the largest residential growth that we're projecting over the short term and over the long term will fall pretty much evenly in both districts. And I can be more specific. Okay, so here's I looked at all the maps and I marked all the new developments where that's what these tabs are. And with the WE1 plan, in the west, we're going to have the Lawrence Station, 3,500 units, and as currently proposed, the Santa Clara Square with 1,640 units. And then in the eastern split, we're going to have the City Place with 1840, or no, yeah, 1840, 1680 was a City Place, excuse me, 1840 is the City Place. So those are the projects that are already happening and have a very high chance of these number of units being occupied over the next 5 to 10 years. On top of that, we have the two big projects that I mentioned, which are the Keeley and the Tasman. And with WE1, we're going to have Keeley falling into the Western District and Tasman falling into the Eastern District. So again, even with the more long-term and even larger projects, we're going to have a balance between the two districts. So our district split is going to, this means that the district split is going to remain stable over at least a decade. Okay, so those are the reasons why I support the WE1 split. And if my fellow committee members have any questions and discussions, I'll be happy to, continue this discussion. But before I finish, I'd like to mention one thing. One of the drawbacks of WE1 is that with the current estimate, the estimate for 2017, we already have a 7% deviation. With the 2010 census data, we had 1% deviation. 7 and 14. But I think that by moving one or two pieces near the boundaries between at Kylie and San Tomas, I think we can make the adjustment fairly easily and still maintain the integrity of these two districts. So I don't think we need to make the deviation a huge impediment, is my belief. Because of the long-term stability that this WE1 split will achieve, which I think will be important for the newly elected council members to get to know their district, and for the city to become familiar with the new, if the ordinance passes, with the new district-based voting system. So I understand that Dr. Gourbelay brought her computer so that we can make some adjustments if the committee would ask her to do so. So that's what I like to point out. And let's see now. Oh, and another thing that I like to propose with this WE1 is that currently pieces 7, 8, and 13 have almost zero population. In fact, they're probably zero because nobody's living there. But we have the Santa Clara Square going in with 1,840 units, which is going to make a big, cause a big swing in the population. And that project is already under construction. I see the frames going up. I'm sure people are going to be moving in very soon, maybe next year, year after, I don't know. So my proposal is to move the pieces 7, 8, 13 from west to east. It's not going to make a difference to the deviation now, but it's going to make a difference in a couple of years. So that is my proposal. Okay. Yes, committee member Ricosa.
I respectfully, strongly disagree. Number one, it's the worst rated of the district of the proposals based on the 2017 estimated deviation, and secondly, it breaks up North Santa Clara, which we heard very strongly that it was something that we did not want to do. So I still feel very strongly with a north-south orientation rather than an east-west. Because the needs of the people at Homestead and Kiley are vastly different from the people in North Santa Clara that have to deal with the stadium.
Okay, committee member
Thank you.
Estrada?
Thank you. No, it's still. Okay. Okay. I concur with Commissioner Gosa's comments, and I just want to make a couple extra comments here. We were advised early on that, yes, the information of the proposed building in the future was informational only, and it could be somewhat considered. I still believe that H2 or NS1 is a better plan, the same as indicated, keeping the north part of San Jose together because they have a lot more common interest. And that's my comments.
Okay, thank you. All right, okay, so I guess everyone voiced their opinions. So where should we take this next? We have the two. Okay, so I guess I'm outnumbered here. Committee members Estrada and Ricosa prefer NS1 and HH2. So should we have? Do we have any opinion on which you prefer, NS1 versus HH2? Does committee member would like to?
Well, I vote for HH2 because I think it has the better voting record for the or future for the Asian CVAP. I think the numbers are 37 and 23. I know for the South, for the South is 23, but you really have the magic of where the population is growing. The interesting thing here, as a side issue, that simply with the matter of time, with for CVAP, you have to have two things: be a citizen and be voting age. So my belief is there is a lot of natural-born citizens here in the city who aren't in CVAP simply because they're not 18. And as time progresses, they're going to become 18. So those numbers will grow even without the population itself growing. Just the magic of the progression of time will increase the CVAP numbers, particularly for the Asians.
Yes, I'd like to speak to that. So when we did the 2012 study, the study in 2012, we did see the big deviation. I guess what we saw was that the Asian population tends to be younger in general. They're immigrants, and so that's why the CVAP is lower. And okay. And also, for some reason, the registration rate was lower with the protected minorities. Okay, so committee member Estrada.
I can support HH2.
Okay, so I think we're down to fairly small number of candidates. So would anybody be interested in making a motion?
I make a motion to accept HH2 as the proposal that we should make the recommendation to City Council.
Any seconds? Okay. So all in favor?
Aye.
Yes, I disagree. Okay, so 2-1. So I think we have a motion. The motion carries. So the city, this committee's recommendation to the city council is HH2. Okay. All right, so let's move on to the next part of this discussion, which is which district is going to go first. So now we're looking at the HH1, which splits the city into, or HH2, sorry, HH2, which splits the city into A and B, A being the northern part and B being the southern part. Okay, so yeah. So Dr. Gobole is going to continue with her presentation. Yes, thank you.
This slide describes the districting election pattern that the Charter Review Committee recommended to the City Council last year, and the City Council accepted and is going to be voted on in June. So this was the Charter Review Committee's recommendation, and the City Council has adopted this pending voter approval. So this is more of the same, and we've already looked at the voter turnout in gubernatorial, which is this year, and presidential, which is 2020 election years, and there is a huge difference, which may affect your idea about which district should be chosen for this year's election. And there were really a very small number of comments about sequencing on Open City Hall, and only one that we've heard tonight, I think, that focused on sequencing. The Open City Hall question just asked about the first 3 plans, which are not relevant now because the committee is going to recommend HH2. I'm sorry, getting tired. All right? So you may or may not be interested in incumbency. HH2 is this column, and as in most plans, we have two incumbents living in what would be the North District and the rest in the South District. Notice that I included Mayor Gilmore here, who is elected at large, so we really shouldn't be looking at where she lives in terms of this year's election. I also wanted to point out that that left-hand map there shows the location of the incumbents' homes, and you can compare that with HH2, which is the 4th plan from the right. Anyway, I'm not, as I said before, I don't think incumbency is a very easy thing to connect with any decision about election sequences. I really don't see any obvious pattern that would be helpful to you in making that decision. So that's all I was going to say about this. If there are any questions I could answer to help you focus on your decision, I'd be most happy to respond.
Committee member Estrada.
I just had a question. Right now they're listed A and B, and so A is north and B is south.
Yes.
And if we determine to call North District A and South District B, there's no, it doesn't mean that.
No, it's not sequential.
Right.
You need
either district can vote in, you still have that option.
Yes, either
Okay.
one could be District 1.
As we said before, by definition, District 1 votes in 2018 and District 2 votes in 2020.
Yes, but you need to pick whether A or B, that is north
Well, that's
or
why
south
we
is
use A and B,
District 1.
not to confuse them with the real names being 1 and 2.
That's right.
Right.
A
So
and B
were
were,
just nondescript
yeah.
labels.
So forget about those
Okay,
two,
thanks
north
for
and south.
clarifying that. Yes, thank you. Okay, any other questions for Dr. Gobele? No? Okay, thank you, doctor. Okay, so again, this is another segment of the two-step decisions, and so I'd like to open the hearing to the public. If anyone has any opinions or would like to express what they have to say, please come to the podium. Give us your name if you like, and tell us what you think. Yes.
Just briefly, I'd like to echo Karen Hardy's statement that we should have the Southern District go first in 2018 and the Northern one go second in 2020. Thank you.
Let me make sure I got that right. South in 2018 and North in 2020 is what you said? Okay, all right. Anyone else has an opinion? Yes.
Hi, my name's Mary Hanaweir, and I also agree with what others have said, that I think that it makes sense for the South District to go first. I think in particular for the reasons that Margaret mentioned about increased turnout in the presidential, I think it would be to the benefit of the North Side District to get the benefit of that additional turnout.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Well, I guess.
Margaret Okuzumi with Fair Vote, and it actually makes enough of a difference that if you reverse the sequencing, then you would only have a chance for 2 minority candidates to get elected to council. But if you did the South Side first, there's a possibility that of a third council seat being a person of color, either an Asian or a Latino candidate making it.
Thank you very much. So far, 3 out of 3 think 2018, the South should go first in 2018, North in 2020. Yeah, so that means, I guess, South will be District 1 is what they're suggesting, yeah. But what's on the map as B will be District 1. Okay, anyone else? Okay, so maybe we can have the committee members offer opinions if they have like to speak. Okay, committee member.
Yes, I definitely agree, and it was even several minutes ago or a half hour ago when the Fair Vote representative made the important point of giving the North the larger turnout, and so I definitely agree that South Side should go first and be District 1 and vote in 2018.
Would you? Yeah, if you have no more comments, and I guess, no, I mean, I'm ready to vote. Okay. Oh, thank you.
Okay, I'll try to get this motion right. Okay, District 1 would be the South, and they would vote in 2018 election, and District 2 would be the North, and they would be voting in 2020. And I make the motion that that be the way it goes. I'll recommend that will be the vote.
We have the motion on the floor. Any comments, questions? Okay, let's vote. All in favor? Aye. Unanimous. All right, motion carries. All right, so we're done. All right, so we have nothing else to discuss. So does anyone want to make a motion to adjourn?
Can I just make a comment?
Yes.
As someone who sat through all of the charter review committees, and I did not sit through all of these, I realize what an incredibly difficult and arduous task that the three of you have performed, and I'm incredibly impressed at how well you've done, and that you've been able to do this on time in a very, very rational and fair and polite and orderly way. And I think you did a very thoughtful job in carrying out your tasks, and I'm very, very impressed. And on behalf of the city, to the extent I can represent the city in this, I really thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for the kind comment.
And I would just ditto everything you just said, Brian. I do truly want to thank you. I know this wasn't an easy process, but it was definitely organized, and as staff, we really appreciate that. I also wanted to note for the public that this recommendation will go forward on May 8th to the council. So if you'd like to come speak to the council, that's the opportunity. Thank you.
And just so the public is aware, the next process will be an actual adoption of an ordinance, adopting these as the official districts for the city, as well as the order of election.
That will be the council making the adoption.
The council would be adopting the ordinance based upon your recommendation.
Thank you.
I want to thank everybody from the public, and particularly the staff, and I think Dr. Goubelet carried the weight of the shoulders of the world on her shoulders the last few months, so thank you very much. Without that data, we'd been nowhere, so thank you very much. And I think to clarify, there's 2 readings at City Council, the first on May 8th and the second on May 22nd. So thank you very much, everybody.
Okay, thank you for adding that. Do we have a motion? Oh, okay, comment by Committee Member Estrada.
Okay. I also want to thank the public and the staff for all their assistance, and Dr. Goubelet for helping us get through this process. Thank you.
And I'd like to thank everyone too.
I make a motion to adjourn.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you.